Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another exciting episode of the Transform Your Confidence show. I so appreciate the time that we spend together to learn, action, and hold space for each other each week, where I bring you insights, tips, and resources from behind the velvet rope, where today's leaders, movers and shakers and disruptors share their nuggets of wisdom and hopefully help you get to the same place much faster than it took them to get there, because that's the goal of this show, guys. In this second week of March, where our theme is media and communications, this week's two-part series is entitled Today's Most Effective Social Media Strategies That Work for Businesses. My guest is corporate social media trainer and online personal brand strategist, Cher Jones. Here's a bit about her. As the founder of Socially Active Training, she leverages over 20 years of PR, marketing, and broadcasting experience to help professionals, leaders, and consultants develop a credible and strategic online presence while teaching them how to use social media at work for work. Her passion, knowledge, and expertise have many referring to her as one of North America's leading experts in online personal branding for professionals. She has worked internationally with a wide variety of organizations that include CBC, Rogers Communications, BlackBerry, the City of Toronto, the Ontario Ministry of Education, and the UK Trade and Investment, to name a few. Cher is also the host of a weekly LinkedIn live stream show called #JustAskCher Live, where she offers tips and advice to help you develop a powerful and professional brand online. Here's what we covered in part one. We kicked things off by defining the differences between traditional and new media and how social media has changed the game on how we communicate today, both on a personal and professional level, that has brought people together from around the world that no other form of media has ever been able to do to date, at least not from an intimacy and engagement perspective. We talk about how marketing and sales has changed from being info-centric to being story-driven and how that's impacted client engagement. We share how the concept of meeting clients where they are versus to bring them to where you are has allowed for the ability to create deeper and more meaningful client acquisition opportunities. Please welcome to the show, Cher Jones. Cher, what a pleasure to have you on. I'm really excited to kind of deep dive this conversation. I mean, everybody, is on social media. Everyone thinks they know social media, but it's kind of like the wild, wild west for those people who aren't initiated. And we know this because, everyone is posting everything under the sun, and a lot of people don't have strategy around it. Mm-hmm. And why I'm interested in having this conversation with you is, at the end of the day, when you put yourself out there, there needs to be an intention and a purpose behind it, right? And you're a real kind of, you really believe in that. And yes. So welcome to the show. And I'd like to just dive right in if you're comfortable with that.
I am absolutely comfortable. You're making me feel right at home. So let's do this.
Let's do this. Okay. So let me start with this. Let's just kind of, start from the beginning. Let's think that the people that are on don't know so much about social media. So I want to kind of do a bit of a preface before we get into the business use of social media. So Cher, why do you believe that social media has taken over the way that we communicate with everyone in our lives today? I mean, whether it's personal or professional, even intimate, if you keep out factoring in the necessity factor around the pandemic induced lockdowns, because, let's kind of talk about that a little bit later on in the show. Why do you feel that social media has kind of taken over the way we communicate today?
It's just because it's literally communication in 3D. You know what I mean? We can literally see what's happening. We can connect. There's the whole science behind social media as well, as far as the dopamine hits that we get when we hear that little ding or the whatever it is. We see the likes go up or we see people responding. We see that little bubble talking for us. And then all of a sudden we are connected. But then on a human level, you got to take a look at the fact that you are now privy to a lot of experiences that you wouldn't necessarily been privy to. And it could be as simple as, let's see what's going on behind me right now. Before, we were just left to describing it and our own memories to hope that we could tell everything. And now we could literally, it's like show and tell. And then that level of connection, that level of, especially as the social in itself have advanced so much. Like there was a time when it was just messaging, right? Way back in the days, it was just a message. It was just text. And then we could send links, and then we could send pictures, and that was a big deal. And now we could do video, and that was a big deal. Not even now. Now we can speak to each other live like we're doing right now. And so it has just allowed you to be anywhere you want to be with somebody else as a result of social media. And so that's just game changing, whether it's personal, professional. You can bring clients in, you can bring your people into your personal life. You have intimate life where we're grown-ups here. People bring people in, socially speaking, at an intimate level. So it's just this new access, this 3D access to life.
Wow. Honestly, couldn't have put it better myself. And I don't think that I've ever heard anyone put it as good as that. So thank you so much for that, folks. If you're just joining us, I am talking to Cher Jones. She is a social media trainer, and she's also a personal branding coach. She's based here out of Toronto. Cher, if anybody wanted to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Always, always, always LinkedIn first. That is the best spot. I always, a lot of entrepreneurs, they make this mistake. They send people to their website, which is great. But if we think about what we just talked about, that idea of being able to connect immediately, you send them to your number one social spot. That's where you need to send them to. And I think for most professionals, even if it's not their number one spot, LinkedIn, just look me up on LinkedIn. I'm easily findable. Just look me up. And I think that opens the opportunity for a conversation as opposed to just oh, that's nice, and keep it moving. So
that's such a great point that you made, because, it's through LinkedIn, me following you and me listening to your lives there on LinkedIn, that I just kind of popped into your inbox and said, hey, and here we are today. So you're completely correct. I mean, you like that's your spot. And folks, if you're listening to what Cher's saying, so if you are kind of like an influencer and IG's your spot, send people to DM you there. If you are a different kind of person, maybe you're a, video making person, maybe you want to send them to one of those types of platforms. It's really interesting what you're saying. I think, again, it comes back to what I said right at the beginning, folks. The intention of use of the, communications platform is really important to understand where you need to be as the expert you are, right? So Cher, let me ask you this. So, what do social media platforms bring to relationships that perhaps traditional forms of media don't? I feel that you've kind of answered that question, but if there's anything you feel that you want to add, I'd love to hear it.
I would say it's accelerated trust. Because now that person, it's how they treat you, because it's an extension of someone being there face to face. Like, let's not separate a digital world from a physical world, because it is the same thing. We are using it to do the same things as if we were right in the same room with each other. So how you treat people online is how you treat people in real life. And so that either accelerates a relationship or it can degrade a relationship as well. So it's one of those things that we just have to continue to recognize that this is just an extension of who we are. It's a part of us. What we put out there online, yes, often it is a very curated approach. And the more authentic you can be strategically, the better. But because at the end of the day, you're going to have to show up and people are going to have to figure out that you are the same person or you're not.
It's really great that you just said that, because you can't fake who you are so much if you're in a conversational style of live video format, which is something you do this every single week. You go live on LinkedIn to give your advice and to answer questions. And, at some point in video, you can curate it and you can, play with a persona that you want to be perceived as. But when you're going live, when you're interacting with people, at some point, the real you does emerge, because you can't always be on an avatar that isn't, succinct to the inherent DNA of the person that you are.
Let me tell you.
Tell me.
Okay.
Tell me.
The real you shows up when you get lipstick on your teeth. And then and I love red lipstick, Lily. And it's like that real you shows up real quick. Or the real you shows up when you spill water on your computer while you are broadcasting live. All of a sudden, whatever facade you think you had, and you have to deal with what's happening in the moment, or when you see in the comments, hey, Cher, and you see there's red lipstick on your teeth, and then you see the timestamp of that comment that was 12 minutes ago, and you're like, oh my gosh. And I've kept that on my YouTube channel because I think it's funny. But it really is. Like, get ready for prime time, because you do need to show up. And then when people meet you, and if you are able to get to that place of you, and trust me, it takes time. Mm-hmm. And people don't recognize that as well, because there's so many things where it takes time with. It takes time with the comfort of using the technology. It takes time in just like there's a whole imposter syndrome out there, putting yourself out there and owning you're awesome. And then there's also that wanting to make sure people take you seriously. And all of that stuff comes into play. But then at the end of the day, when people get to know you, that's why they're doing business with you. Right. It's not the facade. It's because they trust you.
Yes. And that's the big thing here, right? And I guess that, and I think that underlying reality is something that hasn't changed since the beginning of, media, since, scrolls and books and TV and newspapers to kind of where the world we're sitting in today, right? That's always been the one thing that people have tried to accomplish, is that connection, right? Yes. So let me ask you this. So until social media came into existence, people's intention with media from a consumer perspective was to acquire news, views, knowledge, entertainment, and information about consumer goods through, advertising, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. How has social media expanded on that relationship between media outlets and the consumer? Like, what would you say?
Well, interestingly enough, I started my career in broadcast journalism. So I completely understand what you're saying as far as that. This is how we came into existence and started interacting and engaging on a one-way perspective. So we were watching, we were acquiring the information and digesting it, talking to the people around us if they were there or on the phone or whatever. But we would have to, like, if you wanted to communicate with the people that you see, you literally have to write them a letter. Mm-hmm. And later send them emails, or perhaps pick up the phone and call like Station A, Toronto, you know what I mean? Like whatever, CTV or whatever station around the world. Like there was always Burbank, California, you could get the prices right. You could send them an email, or sorry, a snail mail. And then all of a sudden, with the advent of, I would say, live streaming, I think that was what changed the game. There are two instances. So live streaming definitely is, because I was an early live streamer. In fact, way back when Google Hangouts was a thing, and they had this Google Hangouts on Air, which is kind of this is like the evolved version of Google Hangouts on Air. But the way that I looked at it, and I had a show with my cousin called the Lori and Cher Show. And the way we looked at it is like, this is TV on our own terms. But what we recognized is it's not just TV. The third co-host is the audience. Mm-hmm. They are participating, and they have the option of interacting, so that immersion or the inclusion of your audience now has to be a thing. And even if it's not on a live chat, we're seeing now how TV has integrated Twitter, or especially comments on Twitter. We've seen that those two work really well together. And I remember, I don't know if you remember when, what is it? Olivia Pope, I'm trying to think, a Scandal. When that first came to broadcast, right? We're talking in like maybe 2017, somewhere around there. I don't know. Anyways, when that, maybe earlier, everybody was tweeting. We were live tweeting as that was happening. So that became part of the immediate conversation. And it was one of the reasons why it was a great show, but it also propelled it to a whole new level, because broadcasters are always trying to find a way to get people to watch live so you can watch the ads.
Right.
So it's just a participatory, like media is now participatory. It's not just consumption based. I guess that's a great way to sum it up.
Yeah, that's the key right there, what you said there, right? That's a great takeaway, folks. I hope you guys are scribbling away. And if you're not and you're just joining us, I want to make sure that you guys do take the opportunity to, just rewind this back from our YouTube channel, or if you're, listening to it on podcast, just rewind it back. And also want to invite you guys to come over to the Open Chess Confidence Academy blog. It's all there. So whichever way is easier for you guys to come to us and get these words of wisdom, this deep dive that I have with the fabulous Cher Jones, who is talking to us really not just about social media, but just about the entire landscape of the kind of evolution of communications. It's a great lesson for anyone out there that doesn't really know why communications needs to be an intentful engagement opportunity. And that's the other thing, the word opportunity. People don't realize that it's an opportunity missed if you don't really understand why you're there and what you'd like to get out of it, or what you would like to share with people. So let me dive a little deeper there with you, Cher. I want to ask you this. The big differentiator between traditional media communications and social media communications, and why the latter has changed the industry, even for traditional media to have to step it up. And you've kind of just, talked about how that, marriage between kind of broadcast TV and watching live and commenting live with Twitter, which actually brought Twitter back. Remember, it was dying out. It brought it back, right? So my question is its entire premise of success is predominantly based on two criteria, right? So one is connecting. So this is social media, and its advantage over traditional media is, number one, connecting with the consumer rather than informing the consumer. So you just finished, talking about that. And that's thus the advocacy of storytelling. So I do want to kind of tap into that a little bit as the main driving force of social media. So that's one. So we'll come back to that in a moment. And the other one is being able to find the consumer where they already are. So it's like a one-step process, right? Where, with TV and newspapers, magazines, you have to go somewhere to get it. So it's more of a two-step process, right? So with all that preface, here's my question for you. As we get ready to talk about the impact of social media on business, how have these two criteria, right? The connection with the consumer through storytelling, and the one step versus two steps, so you get them where they are rather than try and coerce them to come to you. How have these, generally speaking, made it easier to create relationships across the board so that we can encapsulate everything that we've thus far talked about? And then we're going to head into the conversation about using it in and incorporating it into business. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? Give me your kind of roundup there.
Well, it's the desire to know more. It's the desire to see more. It's the desire to experience more. So what we're seeing now with this traditional medium that has allowed us now with social to extend our reach further and our view further. We want to know, not just to see the finished product. We want to go behind the scenes and see what's happening, whether it's a show or see what a celebrity is going through or a politician is going through. We want to see that. Or even let's recognize now, as the landscape is definitely changing, it's influencer. So you could be whatever. You don't have to be endorsed by Hollywood to be a celebrity. It's one and the same, but that authenticity, and this is why influencer marketing is taking off. But even if we bring it back to just like outside of the business perspective, it's just like we're seeing people we trust and grow a relationship based off of the amount of content we consume through them that seems to be authentic and original, and not necessarily original, but just authentic and meeting our needs or answering our questions. Like, how does this work? This worked for me and I loved it. Like the silliest thing I bought the other day, and it was so random. I've never followed Britney Spears in my life. And then I followed her after I saw the documentary come out. And then so she posted this thing about kinetic sand, and she was just playing with kinetic sand. It's just like the sand that kind of like spreads out. It's fun. And you could just like get lost in playing with it. Why did I go out and I saw it at Walmart and I was like, I want some kinetic sand. I'm almost 50 years old, okay? And I'm buying kinetic sand for myself. Okay. Not one of my nephews. My kids are too big for that. So it would just be like, no, I bought kinetic sand to play with for me. Because Britney Spears was playing with kinetic sand on Instagram. And I was like, I want some kinetic sand. So like, this is what we're dealing with right now. This influence that is like, we see it, then we want it. And it's just because we see it in a natural state. Like it was nothing special. It wasn't like this produced, sponsored commercial video. No, this chick was just playing with kinetic sand and I bought kinetic sand too. How many other people wanted it?
They would have.
Exactly.
They would have, because, you having just already set up the fact that, you're not really a big fan of hers and you don't really follow her, but here you are. And again, here's the other thing that you just said. I think that's magical that I wanted to bring to the table for people who are listening in, is how different forms of communication will lead us to others. So here you were, you watched her on this, platform. Like, what is she on? Like,
it was okay. So it was on Instagram, and it was a friend of mine. And this is if we follow the trail, we see how brilliant and how we need to be strategic about this.
Yes.
So a friend of mine, she posted that this documentary about Britney Spears, free Britney Spears, because she's going through some legal stuff where her dad owns everything, and is I can't remember what it's called, but anyways. And my friend was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so tragic." And I was like, she's like, this is a really good documentary. This is on her stories. And I'm like, I messaged her. I was like, really? Is it good? Like, it's Britney Spears. She's like, no. I feel so sorry for her and blah, blah, blah. And this is messaging going back and forth based off of her posts, her story post. And then so she sent me the link of where I could watch it. And then so I watched it and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, it was just an interesting perspective on what happened over the last, 15 years. And then I'm like, and then in the documentary, there are these girls who have a podcast that basically their podcast is dedicated. This is how meta this is. Their podcast is dedicated to decoding Britney Spears's Instagram posts. Okay.
Wow.
So now I'm on Instagram looking at Britney Spears's posts. I look at some other girl that she had shouted out. It was crazy. Anyways, it was Jamie Litt, her sister. I looked at her stuff, and I'm back on Britney Spears now, looking at her stuff. Now because I'm looking in her posts, the algorithm says, hey, Cher's interested in Britney Spears. So they're feeding me this stuff through. And then I see her playing with kinetic sand, and I'm like, I want some kinetic sand. This is the incredible web that we live in called social media.
Oh my gosh. That warrants like a whole other own show. It's almost like I have to come back and chat with you just about kind of the connection between all of these different forms of communications and how impactful it is and how it actually controls a lot of the influence that's in our lives today. And you're completely right. It's kind of like almost like you send a WhatsApp to a friend and say, oh, I went and had Nando's chicken the other day. And then you start seeing Nando chicken ads pop up wherever you go. It's like, and this whole kind of, conspiracy theory of everyone feeling like, well, we're getting spied on. It's not that we're getting spied on per se. It's that all of these connections and algorithms and, kind of things that have been placed into technology have been done so that they, all of these different, platforms can understand what consumers want and how they can then parlay that into, I can see you smiling that you have another opinion, that they kind of parlay that into how they're going to, create monetary opportunities, because that data is what they sell to be able to then bring in the advertising. So that's one way of looking at it. And I know you have another. Please share.
I just want to call a spade a spade. It is spying. Yeah. The meaning, the reason, like I guess the end game for the spying is so they can make money, and lots of it. Yes. And we don't know the other benefactors as far as who else is getting this information. That ultimately, it still leads back to a dollar sign. Someone's getting paid for this information, and however it's going to be used. I just don't like I don't like to put lipstick on that. Like it's ugly. Like what they're doing. While we are benefiting from it because we are being served up content, and we have to recognize how to navigate the game. So if we think about, even my last example, and then bringing it into a business perspective, the same thing can be said if you produce dope content, like content that just feeds somebody, then somebody shares it. And then all of a sudden someone else is saying, hey, was that good? Does she know what she's talking about, or blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah. Go watch. And then all of a sudden that person now is like, oh, because I was interested in social media. Then all of a sudden they're looking at one video, then they're listening to your 3 podcasts, then they're doing this, and then they're reaching out to say, hey, I want to work with you.
Right.
It's the same thing. And if you are strategic about how you put yourself out there, you might be buying kinetic sand, or you might be buying a course, or you might be joining a community group, like getting mentorship, all that stuff. If the content feeds what you need.
Mm-hmm. And that's just a perfect parlay into us talking about social media and its use in business. Let's deep dive that part of our conversation, Cher. I'm so excited to go there because, this is your area of expertise. This is what you do. This is what you help, corporates, entrepreneurs, professionals, executives do, is how to use social media at work for work. This is kind of your line, and I love it. So please, you were going to say something?
Yeah, because this is where we're at right now. So, there's a lot of agencies who work at the brand level. And what we recognize as well is that at the end of the day, people are still doing business with people. And these relationships really matter as far as the brand experience is concerned. So how your employees show up online, how they are reaching out and connecting internally as well as externally matters more. This digital first environment that we're in, and this is before pandemic, we were still pre-qualifying people based off of what we found on the internet about them. And typically in the professional space, it's on LinkedIn. So this is what we need to do. And we need to manage that and go beyond a job seeking mindset as far as our professional presence online. We need to go way beyond that and think service centric. And when you're looking for a job, sure, go ahead, go ham and go fix it so that you can get that job. But outside of that, you should be taking the time to ensure that your presence shows up and reflects what you do now, not what you did to get the job, but what you do now, because it matters, because that's why people are looking you up.
Absolutely. And for anyone that's not really bought into how powerful the intention of use can be, if you know what you're doing with social media and business, I read an article at the London School of Business website, which is entitled, How Will Social Media Continue to Dominate Business Communications? And in there was a line that really kind of spoke to me, which I think is a great way for us to kind of move this conversation forward. And I quote, social media has no competitor when it comes to business communication. So although it's safe to say that everyone acknowledges that the power of social media in terms of communications is unrivaled, its incorporation into business is not quite that widely known. It's not quite that widely understood, which is why I'm glad to have you on the show to demystify the mystified, my dear lady. So let me just ask you the first question. I'm going to dive into it. For the uninitiated, why use social media for business? Aren't other forms of outreach enough?
No.
Okay.
Because you got to go where your customers are, where they're having the conversation. In fact, you want to be a part of that conversation. And if you are not visible and your competitor is, who are they going to talk about? They don't know you, right? They are not going to hear from you. And so again, whether it's a product, a service, a person, whatever, you need to show up and be a part of it, because so many people are missing out on opportunities, whether it's a speaking opportunity, whether it's a consulting opportunity, whether it's a leadership opportunity or a media opportunity. And they could be missing out those opportunities from somebody they know. And the reason why is not because that person who could have extended the opportunity didn't think that they were qualified for it. It's because they were not remembered. They did not remember you. The social wheel gets the grease.
Right.
Remember that.
Say that again, lady.
The social wheel gets the grease. This is how you are remembered. This is how the opportunities come up, because credibility plus visibility equals opportunity. And that is why social media is that powerful.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills just listening to you. What a phenomenal sentence. That one, guys, you need to write down. It's so, so powerful. Put it up on your whiteboard because it'll change the game. Really, because mindset is important for you to understand and get your head around what is actually happening here. And, Cher's really kind of, broken down a lot of that for us. And let's break down things a little bit further, Cher, in terms of kind of the business and getting people's mind wrapped around, the business versus the personal. So here's my next question for you. What are the top 3 need to knows in terms of the difference between using social media for business versus personal? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, I would think the need to know is recognizing your audience. I think that's very important because each network provides a different angle of the 360 view to your personal brand, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to completely transform into a different person when you're on LinkedIn as opposed to when you're on to Facebook, just to give the extreme examples, but you have to recognize that your worlds cross over. But the audience on Facebook is interested in different things than your audience on LinkedIn. And even your audience from Facebook to Instagram, their expectations, it could be the same people, but their expectations depending on the room. And let's call these social networks, let's just call them a room. If I walk into the LinkedIn room, it's a little bit more of a networking room. We're talking about business in this room. You can't all of a sudden, yes, you can talk about family, but it has to, you gotta look for your right point of entry and opportunity and probably somehow tie it back to something, right? And I'm not saying you can't do that, but generally speaking, it's like, what room you're in, you're going to talk about in this room. And then if you're in the backyard, at a picnic, you're talking about different stuff and we don't want to hear too much about work. Sure, we want to hear what's going on, but it's all tempered based off of where you are. Right. And it's just fascinating. So knowing your audience and where they're at and the mindset that they are in when they're consuming the content matters. So you've got to respect the network and the consumption habits of the audience that you have developed and what they would expect from you. So I would say that would be number 1. Number 2 is really you are the best source of information about you. Right? Or you have the most opportune, like the best opportunity to really put yourself out there and to tell people what it is you bring to the table. So what I mean by that is you need to make sure that when someone looks you up, they have the language to refer you. They want to work with you because what they've read inspires them to work with you or for you. And so it's your job to show up in a way that they either have that language again to refer you, or you influence them enough that they want to work with you or for you. And that's huge. So you have, especially on LinkedIn, and no other network than LinkedIn allows you to do this from the profile, is really break down what it is you can do to help that person who's looking you up or somebody in their network. And how you frame it is rather interesting because you do have to do it from a service-centric framework, because most people, that would be something that I really strongly recommend, because most people, they take it from, here's all the things I've done. No one cares yet. They'll care eventually if you can let me know how you can help me, and then let me know all the things that you've done that you rely on that you'll be helping me with as a result. But you've got to reframe it in talking about how you help people and what it is they accomplish when they work with you as a consultant, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, wherever you are. I need to know that. I need to get that reassurance, and then you can talk about the stuff that you've done. So that's really important. So how you show up matters. And then the third would be create content. It is so important to do that now. And I want to take the pressure off. in the sense of creating content is also with comments. Like it's not just the full blown, like for example, you're a content creator, you create podcasts, you have videos, you have everything, you write, you're awesome. And
so are you, my darling.
Thank you. And but not everybody can do that. And that's the reality of the situation. But everybody has an opinion. Everybody can chime in. Everybody can create some sort of content to show up, right? And you also, and if I can add a fourth, because I think this is really important, I don't know how to separate it, but the fourth would be focus on relationships. So get in those direct messages, build the relationships behind the scenes, because that's where the magic really happens, right? Your content, your profile, that's all designed to get them to hello.
Yes,
right?
Of course.
But you need to go further than that. You need to develop the relationships, and there's so much that can be done in the direct messaging centers now, from sending voice notes to sending to videos to documents and pictures and all that stuff. You can really accelerate that relationship real quick if you take the time to do it.
Absolutely. So this brings me to this question, Cher. What are some of the specific advantages of using social media for your business that perhaps aren't available through other consumer reaching tools? I mean, we've touched upon a lot of them. Can we maybe encapsulate that a little bit so that if anyone's joining us, they can kind of, know what the differences are?
Yeah, I think the number one difference is the ability to communicate in real time. The ability, and we've seen this more than anything else, where it mattered the most is as we've gone through this pandemic and being able to communicate to your customers in real time, as far as your process, how you're keeping them safe, if you're even open, all that stuff. So building those relationships, and even outside the pandemic, you get to communicate to your customers in real time, from stories to anything else. And you can show people how things work, how you're building things, how you are making something. Like there are so many ways to do it. You can show them the behind the scenes of what you're doing. If you're getting ready to speak, if you're getting ready, like there's just so many opportunities that you wouldn't have the ability to do, because before social media, content, as we call it now, was a production. Right? It wasn't, you didn't have the ability to publish or post, right? It was studio time or writing, editing. Like, yes, you still have to do all that, but it's like the barrier to creating content as we know it now is a lot different. It was, and I think a lot of people have to recognize there's a place for both types of content in business. And I think this is where businesses, especially at corporate level, they're losing the game. They're focusing on published and produced content that, that requires a significant budget. And yes, there's an expectation at the corporate level that we expect this, or established business level that we expect this produced content. But we also want to see that original, in the moment content that we connect with on that level, that we trust more. And I think that the businesses that embrace that, the businesses that embrace their people as a part of their content strategy, and not just in a polished, perfected, perfect lighting, makeup artist, editing, all this clearance and all that stuff. There's just this huge opportunity to connect with your customers at a deeper level when you think about content.
And you're so right, because, I don't know about you, but, all of these kind of TV shows that are like the morning shows, and you have like, the afternoon shows, you have the, women talk shows and all of these things. We've already talked about it on social media by the time they've curated their languaging around it, and it's old. And it's already been, we've already hashed it out. We've already gotten everyone's opinions, and we don't want to see it after the fact. And I feel that that's the big challenge that the big media houses are having right now, is that they are standing in their own way of success, because they just don't want to let go of this behemoth that they've created, where they directed the course of what was important to us, and not realizing that we actually control our own narrative today. And that's a big difference too. I'd love your comment on that. I feel like you'll have a really good one to share.
It's true. It's again, it comes back down to that real time perspective, and the fact that I can, if something happened right now, if I wanted to, I could go live and start talking about it with my audience.
Yes.
And own that. And I think that even so, if you have any subject matter experts in your community, which I'm sure you have several, they should be doing that. Even if it's just going live on Twitter or live on LinkedIn or live wherever they are, to talk about that, because they can create media opportunities for themselves if they do that, because then the media can see them, how they respond, because that's what we're seeing. That's why the media has evolved so much to having just panel after panel of people talking about what's going on, because it's the easiest to produce. And that's why we've seen, like, as we go through like the political stage and covering, you know, politics or breaking news or anything like that, all they're doing is they're constantly bringing in contributing experts to weigh in on what's going on, because then it's current and in the moment. It's so hard. And like, to get that breaking news story, is like journalists have to work twice as hard to get that story out on time. And also it's the production value can't be as high as it once was, because they have to, unless you're doing like a Oprah, Meghan Markle interview, then that's a whole other level. But look at how quickly everybody responded.
Absolutely, you're completely correct. And really the big conversation that took place in the world has been not watching the show, but so much the dialogue and the narrative and the opinions and the pain points and the triggering that has happened since that. And that, to me, is the story I look for. Is, okay, this has happened, the interview happened, whatever. It's kind of like the Oscars happened. What are people saying? It's the what are people saying piece that excites me. And I think really is what excites the world. Thank you so much for staying till the end, guys. You know that I really hope that you enjoyed the show and that you'll really use these tips and insights from experience from these great experts that we bring to the table, so that you too can really level things up in your professional life, which in turn will really change things when it comes to your personal life. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is creating a holistic experience for your life. If any of you doubted the power of leveraging social media strategy in business, I really hope that this two-part series has been able to swing you over to our side. Even if it's not your thing for personal use, it definitely needs to be a serious consideration for your business goals. And if you don't know where to start, why don't you just contact Cher, or me for that matter, and we will definitely love to steer you in the right direction. And if it's not something that we can help you with, we will definitely find someone that may be the right fit for you. So please do contact us. If you found the show helpful, I'm so glad. I would love your support by subscribing to this podcast on your Apple and Android platforms. Search the Transform Your Confidence Show, or our YouTube channel at the Open Chess Confidence Academy. And if you're an avid reader like I am, we're also transcribing every podcast into a blog, which you can access at the openchessconfidenceacademy.com/media/our-media. And also, please hop over to our private Facebook group at Transform Your Confidence, where there are networking opportunities as well as knowledge and resources about mindset, media, communications, branding, marketing, leadership, and advocacy for busy executives and entrepreneurs who are seeking to elevate the quality of their life. You know you got to be there. I always pop in and say hello and, just bring questions to the table that are questions that are reoccurring with the clients that I work with. And I really want you to garner that expertise and some case studies that we share now and again. And some case studies that bring alight a lot of these, valuable tips. As always, thank you for tuning in, guys. Until next episode, take care of yourself.